That's what goes through my head constantly. Like you mentioned earlier, adapting to a new job. And that's what I tell myself, feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's fine. It's totally fine. I acknowledge my nervousness and my fear, and I do it anyway, and the results are good.
Hello, and welcome to the Fresh Perspectives podcast, where our intention is growing together and leading with love. I'm Peter Callahan, and I believe we each have incredible capacity to continue to learn and evolve as individuals and as a species, and bring way more love and a lot less fear into the world and our daily lives. Changing can be hard, and I've found that even if nothing changes, having the courage to see our challenges from a fresh perspective can change everything. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are connecting with my friend and past colleague, Desiree Perez. Desiree was born in Argentina and spent most of her life growing up in Germany, but has since lived all over the world. She speaks fluent English, as you'll hear, while also German, Spanish, and is versed in French and Italian as well. So she's got me beat by about all of those languages. Still working on English. So Desiree has had an amazing career already, and I won't go through all of it, but after making her way up through airports, she was in the aviation industry, as we hear more about, in Germany. She made her way over to the United States, down in Texas, working for FlexJet, and then eventually Gulfstream Aerospace, which, if you know anything about G4s, is pretty cool in my book. And then Desiree was actually the airport manager at LAX for Air New Zealand before then beginning her journey as a coach, and became a certified coach through IPEC, which I've mentioned before, where I went, and through the International Coach Federation, and just spent the last year and a half with Sage Coaching, who I'm also a coach for. That's how we originally connected. Now, Desiree is the senior consultant for leadership and organizational development at Curium Solutions. And we had such a fun conversation, really focused on leadership. And Desiree shares some of her story of loving to travel, loving aviation, how that connected her with her father, and really enjoying her first job working hourly at an airport in Germany. She then actually lost her father at 22 years old, which was the same age where she was promoted into leading a team of 80 people at the airport. Desiree shares some of the challenges of those early days of leadership, and we actually role play a difficult conversation with one of her team members who had an interesting idea. We also talk about the value of taking the time to really listen and validate and acknowledge, even when it can feel like a waste of time as a leader. How our fear of not being liked can hold us back in so many situations, and especially around giving others constructive feedback. And then we kind of wrap up talking about why we both believe taking the time to build trust is so valuable, and share this concept of non-arrival practice. We both talk about this idea of there's nowhere to get to, and we are simply in the process on this journey of living, doing our best to not take things too seriously. So thanks again for being here, and let's jump in with Desiree. All right. Well, welcome, Desiree. So glad to have you today.
Thanks, Peter. It's nice to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I know you're just transitioning to a new leadership role, and you've got a lot going on. So it really means a lot that you just made some time to be on with me. And I'm just extremely excited to share some of your wisdom and insights and journey with, at least a couple other people who may be listening today to our conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, like you said, it's going to be on the internet for a decade. So we'll see.
Hopefully, if I keep the subscription going. Exactly. So I know, we talked a little bit about what we could talk about, and one of each of our favorite topics is this word leadership. And actually, I'm going to also put a plug in for aviation because you've got a whole aviation background. And as I'm just working on my pilot's license, maybe we'll filter that in some way. That'd be great. But maybe just sharing, however far you want to go back, some of your journey into leadership and maybe kind of, landing the plane to wherever you'd like to around what leadership means to you now and how you view it. But I'd love to hear some backstory, whatever you feel called to share.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's almost no way to share without sharing my passion and my background in aviation. I think aviation continues to be a big part of my life, just not in my day to day, but yes, I have an affinity for it. I love it. It's great. But my background essentially, being born in Argentina, growing up in Germany, having a dad that absolutely loved to travel and the most he can teach me and the best things he can teach me happened through travel. So I was very blessed that I was able to travel just very early on in my life, all throughout my youth. Not to say I'm old today. So, that sparked this interest in people and different cultures and all of those things. And as I graduated high school in Germany, the thing was, hey, I have to go to college and I have to get a degree, right? So I'm set up for a career. And so I did. I went to college and I started studying international business, which obviously fit sort of in that area of interest for me. My parents ran their own businesses all throughout me growing up. So I was very immersed in the business world very early on. And I started studying, and like everybody does, let's find a job just to supplement, your income or have your first income, really. So I went to work at the airport. And I think a lot of the rest is history. I started as an hourly basis as a customer service agent, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved working with people, seeing different people, really finding my role and helping people to connect with other people. It was always really exciting for me and somebody was running late and trying to get them on the plane and doing all of those things. And I absolutely found a passion in that. I found a passion in the thing that no day is the same as yesterday. Every day was different. And it also built on a specific skill set for me, to an extent that I wouldn't want to do any work today that where I would say today is the same as tomorrow, right? In terms of what I'm doing. So fast forward, was really good at what I was doing. And I was really working overnight and then studying throughout the day. And obviously at some point in time, your body's like, what are we doing? And I felt it after a year and a half. And so my doctor said to me, I think you have to make a decision. And my decision was clear. I dropped out of college and I worked full time at the airport. Very much to the demise of my family. They all said, how can you drop out of college? You need a college degree. If you want to have a career, you need a college degree. And nope, that was it. I loved working at the airport. And so I was really good at what I was doing technically. And at 22 years old, they offered me a supervisor role, or at that point called a duty manager role. And so now I had 80 people reporting to me on my shift. And I had absolutely no idea how to treat people. I mean, obviously, I know how to treat people, but from a leadership perspective, no idea. How do I go about it? How do I have those tough conversations? How do I get everybody to row in the same direction? So that has been the theme all throughout my career. And I continued developing through the ranks and higher positions and more responsibility. And there was always this big question mark of, am I actually a good leader? What does it mean to be a good leader? And, in 2011, I had the opportunity to relocate to the US from Germany for a job offer. I came, I did that. It was great. Continued to grow through the ranks. More opportunities opened up. I went with the flow. I moved all over the place. And then at some point in time, I was like, okay, I'm ready to get my master's degree. So that tells you, although I dropped out of college, I still got a college degree. I got it while working full time. And the question was, what is my master's going to be? And I decided to get a master's in leadership and strategy. And I think that was sort of a pivot point in my career. And I loved it. and I got done with it. It was a self-paced thing, so I got done with it in 10 months. That's how much I loved it. And graduated with that, did a case study for the employer I was working for at that point in time, and decided, you know what? I want to become an executive coach. I had no idea what a coach does, but that's what I wanted to do. So I went and I became a certified coach. Did that for about 11 months, almost a year, a process to become an executive coach. And it changed so much in terms of my perception, in terms of learning about myself. And I knew that I wanted to help others with exactly that and defining what their role as leaders is. And because that's different for everyone. And part of that was also because, I've had some really good bosses throughout my career, and I had some bosses where I thought, "Ah, I don't know." And that's just my own perception. So I think all of those things combined then ultimately led me to work as a coach. And fast forward almost 7, 8 years now. This is what I do on a daily basis is work with leadership, work on employee engagement things and change management things, which is incredibly hard for any human being. So, as a leader, how do you help others through that? And I'm so passionate about it. As a matter of fact, I took my daughter to the doctor yesterday. There was a new doctor, and the nurse, as a nurse practitioner, she was asking me, "So, what do you do for work?" And I said, I have organizations with change and transformation and leadership development and people understanding more about themselves so that they can work through blockers. And she said, this is more of what the world needs nowadays when we hear what's going on in corporations and so on. And not that I needed it, but it was such a moment of, yes, this is why I'm doing it. And I absolutely love what I do on a daily basis.
Amazing. Amazing. Wonderful. Wow. You really landed the plane beautifully there too. That's impressive.
Well, 16 years in aviation, so it should bring you something about landing a plane, right?
Yes. Got to get that flare down, make sure your airspeed's right. Yeah, that was perfect.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Desiree. Well, there's too many topics already to follow back up on, so I'm gonna do my best here, but so many ways we can go. And one of the early things you said that sort of led to you dropping out and not continuing your degree at that time was that how much you loved the work you were doing. And as someone who also loves to travel, and I loved hearing how much you got from that and how that sort of opened you up and drove you and probably made you feel more drawn to the airport in general. So you went there to find a job. But I've just encountered many humans at the airport who don't seem to feel the same way about their job as you did and do now. And thinking about sort of what you were talking about, different leaders having their own, defining what their role is, having their own approach. And I don't know, I guess part of me is curious just to start of that level of engagement that you were experiencing. What were the factors that you think led to that? Because not only at airport, I just know a lot of people who don't feel, so many clients that I work with
Mm.
don't feel that level of engagement or don't even have an idea of how to create that. So what do you think was leading to that for you at that time? And then maybe we can parlay that into how leaders
Yeah.
can help foster that.
Yeah. I think for me, it was a connection to my passion, right? My passion of traveling. So this is what I grew up with. It was also very much sort of something that connected me to my dad. I lost my dad when I was 22, so very relatively early on. And I felt like that was always this thing that he and I connected on. And we had so many, great memories. So there was something really meaningful behind that. The other thing I think is that I have an incredible value for freedom. And it symbolized freedom for me. Freedom in the sense that I was trusted. And so I could do what I needed to do. Freedom in the sense of people get to fly on airplanes. And that for me, to an extent, symbolizes freedom. Freedom to create new beginnings, to start new chapters, to reconnect with people, right? In so many ways. And you get to enable that. So I found meaning in that. I found meaning in enabling people to have successful business meetings, right? Did I consciously know that at that point in time? No, I didn't. But I think, just really reflecting back on that. And the other thing, I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again, was just the fast pace, and it's changing, and every day is different, and every day you solve a new problem. That just fills my cup to this day. It's what I love to do.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I love the connection to the value of freedom. That's really cool to hear. And just how many ways, and like you said, you didn't realize this at the time, but looking back, it's like, oh yeah, there were so many boxes checked here for me. And then connection to your dad. I'm sorry that you lost your dad so early at 22. And it's interesting that at that same age, you wound up with 80 people underneath you, that you're
Hmm.
responsible for. I love the Simon Sinek quote: leadership is not about being in charge. It's about caring for those in our charge. So you had
Yeah.
80 people to care for to some degree. And part of me is just curious at 20, like, what happens? Like, can you share a few experiences? Like, that must have been so challenging. And
Yeah. I don't think I knew that it was caring for, right? So it was
yeah,
this. So you also have to see I was in a differential environment, right? I was in Germany where everything is very process driven and outcome driven.
mm,
Everything is very regulated. So there was a certain swim lane that I was, following and fitting into. And I think it was also a time where this whole thing of feeling and caring and those things really didn't have a space in the workplace, right? So
we still have a
short of
long way to
that,
go, for the
so
record. That's
yes,
Germany or elsewhere.
we still do. Yes, absolutely. But I think today we at least have the conversations about it. So with sort of putting this piece of caring and connecting with people to the side, it was challenging because I was like, how do I provide the feedback? How do I get all the people to row in the same direction? I've had an ability, thank goodness. It's just a gift that I have that I can quickly connect dots and I can come up with ideas that are out of the box. But that doesn't mean that everybody does. And that's okay. But understanding that as a leader is tough. And then how do you bring people along? You know, I I love the story. There's a system in Germany that when you go on vacation, you book, like your 2 weeks air travel with the hotel and everything as a package. And so at that time in Germany, they would offer pre-check-in the night before, right? So we didn't have the apps, we didn't have any of that. So, I mean, I'm talking like I'm 60 years old.
But you actually had to
It's
go to
not,
the
but
airport to pre-check in? Is that what you're saying?
you're actually,
Oh my
yes, you
gosh, I
actually had
can't
to
even
go.
imagine.
You had to go to the airport to pre-check in. So it was from 6 to 9. It was for the following morning, early departure flights, because all the vacation flights, those that are part of these packages, would depart very early in the morning on. So it was an extra service that you could go and drop off your bag the night before, so you didn't have to worry about it in the morning. And so we had, generally we would have like lines out the door, massive operation. And one of the agents that was reporting into me for that specific shift, he had a military background. And so in his mind, he came up with a really effective system, a red card, a yellow card, and a green card. So
That
people
sounds like
that were not,
football, European football, not
yeah.
military to me, but okay, that's in military too. Got it.
So he would, if people were giving him a hard time, he would show him the red card and off you go back to the end of the line. And that was his way of managing customer expectations and, customers that wouldn't follow quote unquote the rules. And so that was my first thing I was sort of faced with of, yeah, obviously you can't do that. So how do you manage that? How do you provide the feedback? How do you, I mean, it was stuff like that. That's at the end of the day, it's nothing, earth shattering or anything like that. But how do you have a conversation about that? And how do you say that? How do you address it? How do you say it in a way that it doesn't create a crack in a relationship? So yeah, so I very vividly have that memory of my first tough conversation that I need to have about. hey, that card system is really not working. A great idea.
So, all right, great. So that was a little example here that that card system isn't really working, but great idea. And often when because this is maybe my favorite topic to work on with leaders is challenging, difficult conversations. Because to me, it's so much of where the rubber hits the road, and this idea that ruptures will always
Mhm.
occur. There's always going to be interpersonal challenges when we're working with fellow human beings, and yet repair for that rupture is always possible. It's not guaranteed. It's not inevitable, but there's a lot of skills that we can build in to do that. And so I love talking about it. So if you're up for it, I'll put you on the spot. Like, could we just role play for a
Yeah,
moment? Like, I almost would love to demonstrate. Like, I could be that person. I think it'll make more sense for you to use your skills now. I'm sure you did your best then, but I'm guessing today's conversation would be a little bit different the way you would frame it. So do you mind doing that for a sec? Is that all
yeah.
right?
No, let's go
All
for it.
right.
Not that anybody would say no in this forum,
Well,
right?
you
But
can.
let's
I mean,
go
it's
for
fine.
it.
I can edit it all out if you want to. I don't really should do that, so everyone's gonna hear all this. But uh,
No, go for it. Let's just call him Jack. I don't remember. Jack.
Desiree, I know that this is it's challenging, and in the evenings when we're doing this pre-check. So I had this idea of using red cards, yellow cards, and green cards to just let people know, and maybe exact some punishment on those who are not behaving. So how does that sound? Can we roll that out tomorrow night?
I love the idea, and I think it's great that you thought of solving for something that we have been struggling with for a while. Walk me through how you envision this actually working
Sure.
in
Yeah. I
real
mean, I
life.
think I'll just get out there before 6 o'clock when people show up, and I'll just be walking up and down the lines, maybe letting people know what to expect and what they need to do. And if they don't follow along, maybe I'll show them a yellow card. Like, this is a warning. If you do that again, you can't keep stepping out of line or doing whatever. If you do that again, I'm going to give you a red card. You've got to go back to the end. So I think that should be pretty clear for folks. What do you think?
Mm, okay. And then you think when they get the red card and have to go back, what's the
No,
reaction gonna be?
I don't know. I mean, they'll probably be a little bit upset, but I mean, there's rules to follow. This is Germany, so they understand if you don't follow the rules, there are punishments that are exacted, and their whole party will have to go back, and that'll really show everyone else in line that they need to stay in line. So maybe I'll only have to do it a few
Mm,
times. I'm thinking.
yeah. Oh, leading by example, I see. Love it. Okay, let's reverse the roles a little bit then. Pretend you are the customer and you paid a certain amount of money to go on this trip, and you're bringing a little bit too much luggage and you really don't want to pay even more money because you now have excess weight, and somebody shows you the red card. How would you react to that?
First of all, I would never pack my bag overweight. I've got a scale at home. I mean, that's just poor planning. But Jews here, and I'm like, how empathetic is Jack really, right? Because it's our ability to be honest about the way we show up. So I love that as just a question, just stepping out of it for a second.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. Depends on how early it is and what if I had breakfast, maybe it's probably. But yeah, I guess going
Mhm.
back to Jack, like I probably wouldn't be that happy
Mhm.
about it.
Mhm. So, if you know that, how do you think then this is going to help us solve our customer service issue of people getting upset?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, my hope would be it would limit the amount of people that would be upset because we'd have more clarity about what proper behavior looks like. But I understand that we might then be making a fewer people even more upset at us. So yeah, I think I do understand to some degree. What do you think we should do, boss?
Well, I don't know that I have the full solution, but if we think about a win-win-win perspective, so win for the customer, a win for the airline, a win for us, what would that look like?
I feel like good. Was there anything else that you might add in there? Did I not play my role as accurately as I could have?
No. No, it was perfect. I think, to summarize it, it's essentially instead of tearing down this idea, which was just not practical, like it was just not applicable, lifting up the fact that somebody had an idea and involving them in the problem solving process. I don't think we're going to adopt this idea, but what other ideas do you have if you look at it through the lens of a win-win-win for
Yes,
everyone?
and you didn't start that way,
Um,
right? You didn't start great idea, but we're not gonna do it.
no,
Because even that, like, that acknowledge that there,
yeah.
and this is where I love Yend as a tool, is just as a just to have this is, for those who don't know, it's an improv
Mhm.
comedy tool,
Yes.
where in improv comedy, you need to always agree with what your fellow performer says, and that's the first step. And I don't love the word agree necessarily in leadership
Mhm.
specifically. As we learned, we went through the same coach training with IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence Coaching, and we really learned a lot about validating and or acknowledging. So that the yes to me is I hear you. And that's what I heard you do really thoroughly at the beginning. I hear what you're saying. Help me understand more. And just to say, Desiree, I think this a really important point. I get a lot of resistance from leaders. I don't have that much time. I need to get this person moving. Like, no, that's not a good idea. Here's what we're going to do instead. Or give me some better ideas because that's not a good one. Right. And just jumping right to that because it saves a couple. I mean, you and I, it was a couple minutes to have that conversation. So, yeah. So I'm just curious how you think about that return on investment of taking this extra time.
Yeah, I think the way I share this with the leaders that I work with is in the long run, it's a time saving tool because if you can't create the buy in, then people are going to swim with you. What happens if somebody consistently swims upstream and fights whatever you are trying to impose? So, if you can sort of create that buy in, which you and I both know from a coach perspective, buy in is half the battle. If somebody feels like they have a valuable piece in there, they're being heard. Parts of their idea might be heard, even if it's not the original idea, or parts of their ideas are being implemented or tweaked and still being utilized. That's what keeps people going. So that initial time investment, yeah, it's a time investment, but it will come back to you twofold or threefold in the long run of the relationship.
Absolutely. There's like hearing that and taking that in and even believing it. And then there's experiencing that actually occurring, right? And seeing that happen. That's another gap that I come across is that sounds great, Pete. And I generally believe you. And it's just not the patterning that I have. That's not how I was taught to be a leader. It's not what I've seen. And like I wound up in leadership at a really young age. I was 23, was a top salesperson at the Fastenal store I was working at. So they gave me a location and I was good at my job, but it's a totally different job to lead. It's something completely different to hold the space for people and to try and create
Mhm.
that buy-in that you're speaking to. And it's just so interesting to, I guess, me into our conversation of like teaching these skills and to impart this knowledge, this wisdom to those who just haven't tried before. So way to sort of transition this is, but I'm just wondering now through all these experiences that you've had, how you try to meet people where they are, knowing that some of this is still very foreign to leaders and how to start to bring them along on this journey of
Mm,
trying out a
yeah.
different way, this change management terminology that can be so resistant.
Mm. I think there's two pieces to this. One key component is non judgment. I think, something that I have learned over the years is I don't necessarily want to know about another person before I meet them because what it does, it clouds my judgment. And as a coach, I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm just here to hold space, right? To meet them where they're at. So if I can strip my judgment, then I actually have the ability to meet them where they're at. Because the reality is everybody is where they're at in most of all cases because of some sort of experience, some sort of belief, some sort of perception, some sort of assumption that they have either about themselves or about a situation that doesn't let them do what they would like to do, or that doesn't let them reach the point where they could do something else. If you think about it, 90% of our behaviors, 90% of the things that we do are automatic to us. So our brain automatically does them. We are not conscious of that. So helping people understand where, first off, help me understand where you're at. Help me understand where you're blocked. Why is that so hard? Then understand what got you there. And then what's your choice in all of this? Do you want to continue to perceive it that way? Is it working for you? Clearly, it's not working. So then, what are other ways to look at this? What are other ways to try it out? What are things that you think you can do to start moving the needle to make your own life easier? So it's that, right? It's giving the understanding of, we call it wisdom. What's in it for me, right? By wisdom, what's in it for me, filtering that out, and then from there being able to pivot. But I think my two main things are non-judgment
Yes.
and listening.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
listening for the things that are not
Non-judgment
being
and
said.
listening. Yeah, absolutely. Curious if you have any where you've done this, worked with another leader, and just through sharing some of your own experiences and asking these questions, like I guess part of me is curious
Yeah.
of times where gone well or not gone so well, right? Because I've had plenty of clients too who've, no, I think I'm all right. It's like this is fine. I really like what you're saying about offering up the choice. Like, if you don't want to do it differently, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's exactly it, right? This is where choice comes in. And I think as coaches, we have part of our work is to challenge people in a loving way to say, I hear you, but still, you wouldn't have brought it up if it wasn't an issue. If it wasn't that important, why are we talking about it? I mean, there's plenty of examples where it went well. Generally speaking, the people that I work with and have worked with in the past are at least open to exploring it and be like, ah, okay, yeah, I'll go there. And then those that are, resistant to it, to your point, you challenge that, you support. And if somebody's truly set on the idea that they don't want to change anything, I can't make that happen. I will try, I will do, but I also respect if somebody says, nope, I'm not willing to change anything about that. Okay. That is the choice that you're making in that
Yeah,
point,
it's
and I'm
okay.
not here to judge that.
And as a coach, we're able to do that and just hold that space and accept that. As a leader, this issue becomes a lot stickier. Right? And this really makes me think of these feedback conversations and especially accountability, holding people accountable. I like what some folks out there say that, we all want accountability and don't want accountability at the
Mhm.
same time. Like, I want you to support me and have my back and check in, and I want to be able to do what I want. If I don't want to hit a deadline because
Yeah.
I got a better thing to do today, then I'd love for you to leave me alone. It's this real paradox I find for leaders. And I've kind of been using this term caring accountability just to acknowledge that it's not about being against someone or forcing anyone to do anything, which we can't do anyway. So holding that reality, like, this person is a fully autonomous human being making a choice to work here, to continue working for me and not quit, and to either get these things done that we've hopefully clearly agreed to and set clear expectations together, which is usually the first gap, or not do those things. And to your point, I love offering up these two foundational leadership questions that really you already kind of spoke to.
Mhm.
How are you doing and what do you need? And what and how, I find, are kind of these keywords you can switch them to. What are you working on and how can I help? And then we set these clear expectations and then coming to people and saying, how's that going?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's going great, or I'm behind. Okay, what do you need? What's getting in the way? To your point about the blocks. Right. And if we do that with consistency, it just builds trust and shows we have each other's
Mhm.
back. And as I say it now, it sounds really simple, but it can be really sticky and complicated based on the emotional patterning we have, how we've been led, sort of how we show up. So yeah, what's coming to your mind as I'm spouting on about this?
Yeah, I think, to your point, yes, it becomes so much stickier. One thing that I really notice as a thread throughout most of all of my conversations is why are our tough conversations so hard?
Close.
For two reasons. One, we don't want to upset people, we want to be liked. And two, is the perception that we have around having tough conversations. Oftentimes I hear clients say, well, I'm going to have a confrontational conversation. Why does it have to be confrontational? If we open up a conversation with one, do I have permission to share my feedback, right? When you ask somebody for permission, automatically it disarms sort of that wall that you might experience that you're probably dreading, rightfully so. And two, to say, we're here to solve this together. I want to hear your perception on this because truth is we all have a different perception, therefore different truths of what is actually transpiring in the situation. Understanding that and then coming together to say, okay, again, I love that lens of win-win. What do we have to do to solve for this together and create a win for you and a win for me? Right. And this, hey, I'm in here with you. I'm not telling you what to do, but I want to hear from you what you want to do and how I can support that by going into this collaborative win-win type of approach. So those are the two things that, come to my mind. If you listen to this and you say, yes, absolutely. I don't want anybody to dislike me or to see me as the bad person. It's normal. Absolutely normal. And we all struggle with that. So we just have to look at we are not the bad people when we give that feedback. It's all about how we deliver it. And the other thing that I also always say is if we don't provide the feedback, we are robbing people out of a development opportunity. Why? Because we don't always see it ourselves. So in that moment, we are taking away from a development opportunity of somebody else.
It's like this concept that every problem, every challenge contains gifts or opportunities. Sometimes we see it and feel it in the moment. Sometimes we reflect on it later. Sometimes we have no idea.
Yeah.
And yet, I think you and I both believe that can be true for each situation. And it reminds me of the definition too of sort of being brave. I'm constantly trying to share this with Claire, my daughter. What does it mean to be brave? It means to be scared and to keep going and right, to keep moving. Not that we need fear, it's very useful in certain situations, but in many situations, like, oh, I'm a little nervous, I'm a little scared to do this. And yet it still feels like the right thing to do or what's needed. It's going to fill one of my needs. So I'm going to find my courage, right? There's no such thing as courage without fear.
That's what goes through my head constantly. Like you mentioned earlier, adapting to a new job. And that's what I tell myself, feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's fine. It's totally fine. I acknowledge my nervousness and my fear and I do it anyway. And the results are good. Things will unfold. And this is where we have to challenge ourselves too, to walk the talk, right? We challenge our clients on those things. So we have to do the same to us, to ourselves.
The normal need of wanting to be liked as social creatures who survived for millennia by supporting each other, by having each other's backs and keeping each other safe. And I love the perspective, and some of this comes from internal family systems, that like there are parts of us that have been created to protect us that come out in certain situations, but that actually harm our ability to connect or hold us back. And I love that as a lens because it helps me lower my judgment of first myself and then of others to say everyone is doing their best to be supportive and collaborative and get their job done. We all fundamentally have the same needs that we're trying to meet, and yet we just have different ways of going about it. And very few people, just like very few parents, wake up in the morning, how can I screw my kids up today? Very people like, oh, how can I, make my boss's day worse or make my own job harder by being resistant to things, right? We're all doing our best and there's understandable things getting in the way. So we don't have to be each other's therapists to create some amount of space to just check in like, hey, what's going on? Help me understand. And there's the phrase, it's hard to hate up close. The more understanding we get, the more we can soften our own stories that we're telling about this other person and hopefully create some space to collaborate the way you're describing and really find a way to work together. And that to say, I don't think every person is meant to work together. And there are times
Hmm.
I think when, all right, it's our ways of operating in the world, our styles of communication just are not, we're not finding a way to do it. There's certainly to me is a point where it's all right, it doesn't make sense to keep trying. But I think so few leaders still have the skills that you're describing that we're talking about here to even get to that point. To me, we almost never need a performance improvement plan if we're having skillful leadership conversations along the way. And we might get to a point where, hey, let's agree that this just isn't working out. And if you can't, with the accountability, if you can't get these things done, we've tried a bunch of different ways. Maybe we can find a different role within the organization. Or how can I support you in finding a different job somewhere else while we transition respectfully
Hmm.
and smoothly into someone else doing this job? And that obviously that can be as hard as it gets, but it's much more respectful, compassionate than, well, I've I've tried to tell you to do all these things over and over again. You're not doing them. We put you on a performance improvement plan. You didn't get much better, so you're fired. Like, there's just so many other ways of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, this is what fascinates me about all of this is that the depths of human behavior are incredible. They are fascinating to me, and then that we're all on a journey and the realization that we actually will never get to a goal, but it's a lifelong journey of development, of growth, of reflection,
Mhm.
of all of those things. I'm a very goal driven person. So I've always thought, oh, when I get to this, then that. And when I get to this, then that. No, it never stops, and accepting our journey as that, as a journey of self discovery, as a journey of growth, as a journey of, I might not do everything right, but I will learn from it. As a recovering perfectionist, always, oh, yes, I can't make any mistakes. Well, guess what? That's not working. So accepting the fact that I will not be perfect and embracing who I am, right? In my way. So I think that, really that also oftentimes the perfectionism is such a big piece in having these tough conversations and so many pieces of being leaders, knowing that we are on a lifelong journey or a lifelong quest, however you want to call it, and being in for the long haul and being in for the ride. And there's no need to rush anywhere.
Yes. Thank you.
And I say that as I'm a person that's always like, I got to get
Absolutely.
here. I got to do this.
The non-arrival. How do I acknowledge, accept there's nowhere to get to? I'll not be more happy when I get this or that. It's an internal process. And you're invoking, as you often do, so much Brene Brown here. The Gifts of Imperfection was
Yep.
one of her early books that I love. And also so much of her message is around the power of vulnerability. And it's just making me think of to open these conversations as leaders with, I don't have all the answers. I think three of the most powerful words we can utter as a leader is, I don't know. And come back to the yes, and I have faith in you. I have faith in me. I trust. I have confidence, humble confidence. I don't know. And I believe that we can get through this, that there is a win-win to be found within this situation. And to just talking about letting down the defenses, the guards to start a conversation with just, I'm not exactly sure what to do. I'm a little stuck, especially maybe for a new leader or manager. I've never been in this situation before. And I care about you or whatever sincere. And, I'm in this with you. Like you were saying, like we're in this process together. So I'm open. I want to help me understand, and I want to find a way for us to work together and to get these things done we've been asked to do, and to let you also live a human life and be with your family and not have to be here until 10 o'clock every night, whatever it is. Like just uttering what we want and then acknowledging we don't know, I think can just create so much more space for honesty and
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I see too. I have to have all the answers because I'm a leader. No, you don't. That's why you hire people that are different from you with different skill sets so that they can bring you the answers.
yes.
But the truth is, it took me forever to figure that out. So
I quit that early leadership job that I was talking about because I started, it went okay for a couple of months, and then it was so clear that I had no idea what I was doing, and I had people older than me working for me and some younger, and I just had no concept or model for how to do this. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I know I'm dropping the ball real bad. So, and it kind of set me on this journey to learn and study more and eventually become a coach, help others be in this process, because it is very challenging, but extremely meaningful if we feel called to be of service, to care for others in that way. I mean,
same.
it's a lot of responsibility, and it's kind of insane on some level to be a leader. And yet I think the rewards can be immense as well. So any final thoughts, Desiree? Any questions that I didn't ask or things coming to mind? I feel like, again, we're coming in for a really smooth landing. It's a beautifully steady approach. I appreciate it.
I don't know. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I think my final thoughts were those around this is a lifelong journey and to accept it as such. And it's also a reminder to myself. So I appreciate your time, Peter, and for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you, Desiree. So mutual. And wishing you well in this next chapter of your journey, and very much looking forward to keeping in touch. Thanks a lot. All right. Well, so grateful again to you, Desiree, and to each of you for being with us for this conversation on the Fresh Perspectives podcast. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, I would be really appreciative if you'd be willing to take a moment to subscribe, offer any feedback, and most importantly, share it with a friend if you think they might benefit from listening. Thanks so much for your curiosity. Wishing you courage and compassion. Be well.